And you are live.
Thank you. Good evening for any of those of you that are not on the screen, and good evening to those of you that are on the screen. Is my usual um, uh, process is I just go around the screen and introduce whoever is present I'll call it in person. We have Alan Miller, who's a member of the board. We have Alderman Ross Arnett. We have Jake Iverson, who sits in with us each month with Watermark. We have Beth Bellis, our harbor master. We have Mike Tomasini, a member of the board and vice chair. Peter Trogdon, who is not in Upper Northwest this time, so is joining us from wherever. He's a board member. Frida Wildy, a board member. Debbie Goslin, a board member. We have Hope Stewart from the city of Annapolis and County SMBE. Am I right? Do I remember that right, Hope?
That is
Eh,
correct.
Okay. And Madeline, our COA TV guru. And what I don't see we have is our reporter. But hopefully, Madeline, I assume we're recording this, so um, and so she can pick up from there. And we have Scott Allen, who's a board member. I sent everybody the agenda. We have Frank Biba in the waiting room, and he is here to talk about the proposed ordinance 03623, which is a harbor line adjustment at President's Point. So, and we also have Ashley Leonard. Ashley may want to come in. Oh, she did. There we go. Um, so, Madeline, if you'll bring Frank in, we'll just take him first. Frank, you need to turn on your speaker and you need to turn on your video.
How's that?
That looks good.
Okay, good.
Okay, so let's do this. Okay. So Frank is here to discuss or present the proposal for 036 2023, which is an adjustment to the harbor lines. I sent everyone Frank's updated package that has dimensions, et cetera, on it. I also sent, and I think hopefully everybody got it, I sent two snippets. One is an aerial view of the area in question in Spa Creek, and the other is the is from the chart. Now, I didn't see where necessarily that email went out, so what I did was just to pull this up. So I'm going to share a screen just to orient us. If everybody can see this, oops, where'd it go? That's not it. Where did my drawing go? Don't want that fence. I want, so I can shut down. So share screen again. Let me try this share screen again, or somehow. Madeline, I thought I had this down. So how do I now get out of your screen sharing? Stop share. Okay. Let's go back and go to get rid of this, and try. Okay, now let's try it again. Okay, I am sharing an overview of Spa Creek. The area that my cursor is on is President's Point. Opposite President's Point is Cheston Avenue. Frank did clarify for me this object that sticks out here, and I believe this object that sticks out here were work barges that are no longer there. So the normal creek runs from opposite runs from this point at the end of Cheston Avenue over to President's Point. So Frank, with that, I'll let you go ahead and tell us what's going on and why the harbor line needs to be adjusted.
All right. Well, the President Point Condominium Association wants to remove and rebuild that T-head pier, which is right opposite the swimming pool. They want to cant it a little bit to the left and extend it 69 or 70 feet, somewhere in there, and increase the number of slips from, I believe it's 18 to 25. They're not increasing the number of slips total in the marina. It's 57 now, it'll be 57 afterwards. They are adding the extra slips that they're adding will be removed from the bulkhead. You see it's really tight in that corner there. So several of those slips will be removed. And they're doing this for two reasons. One is there's actually a standard from American Society of Civil Engineers about the width and access to small marinas. And they want to comply with that. Also, they want to be able to handle the larger boats on this pier. If you look at the bulkhead going north, all the way to the end there, that water gets very shallow. So they did consider adding more slips and extending the pier that way, but it's just too shallow to accommodate what they need it for. So in the package I sent, there is the same overhead with, I added 70 feet to the end of, or I guess 69 feet to the end of that pier. And then I measured the distances to that mooring, which is directly above it, right, right there. That's the closest mooring. You see the mooring field there are 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 moorings there. So that's the closest one. And currently, that mooring is 289 feet from the end of the T-head. And when it's rebuilt in its proposed configuration, it'll be 217 feet, that mooring. And the existing T-head to the end of Cheston is currently 393 feet. And with the new pier from the same point at the end of the T-head, it would be 350 feet. Now, Terry did ask me about the finger pier or the westernmost finger on the T-head, and measure that distance because it will constrict it a little bit as you measure to the Cheston bulkhead, and that measure will be 320 to 325. And I did all these measurements on Google Earth, so I'm sure it's a few feet off a little bit at this scale. So that's it in a nutshell. I read Terry brought to my attention the staff report, and they noted that in the original package that I sent you, the 8.5 by 11 were shrunk down from a full blueprint sheet, which is like 2.5 by 1.5. And the original scale was 1 to 20. When it shrunk down, of course, that's not the scale anymore. So I had Bayland, which is the engineering firm that is working for President Point, redo these to a scale of 1 to 60, still in the 8.5 by 11 format. And you should have that, which is what I sent to Terry, I guess, last week. So that is to scale. If you have a 1 to 60, you can get all the measurements that you might have questions about. The harbor line itself is being moved, proposed being moved. Excuse me while I read my notes here. it's 54 feet. It's not 70 feet because if you look at the harbor line map, the original harbor line map, the 1 to 200, which should be part of the original package, the harbor line is actually something like 20 or 25 feet outboard of that T head, which means that at the end of the T there can be used as a slip. With the proposed pier, the harbor line is only 5 feet outboard of the new T head. So while the added distance is 69 feet, the difference in the harbor line is 54 feet. And I did add some in the original package. I added several examples of previous harbor line amendments. And my recollection is there have been many more than what I sent you, 12 or 13, I think, in total. And I couldn't access them because they date back to the 80s originally. And the city started to digitize their database sometime in the 90s. So I asked the city clerk to give me all she had. And of course, she went on her computer and she gave me what she had. But there are other things that are just not in the digital database. And you would have to go through all of the hearing documents. You know, they have these boxed annually to retrieve all of that stuff. So I didn't do that. So you only have partially, you know, the total number of harbor line amendments. So that's it in a nutshell. If you have any questions, please fire away.
Frank, let me ask you, I pulled up a drawing, I think was, and I don't remember it, I think it was from a more recent package because I think it's the one that's 1 inch and 60 feet. And my question, and it kind of went to an earlier question that I asked you about the use of the T head. Can everybody see this? I don't know what is up on the screen, but I hope it's the black and white drawing from Bay Land. Is that what it is?
No, it's the Google Earth, Spot Creek.
Oh, it's the Google Earth. Okay, so give me a minute. I then have to open this into a let me think how to stop share. Oh, maybe I do it this way. Okay, stop share, screen share. Okay, let's see if this doesn't do it. Am I scrolling down through a document?
Yes.
Okay. So Frank, on this drawing, as I understand it, the existing harbor line is this black line that comes down. It makes a right-hand turn. It jogs basically around the T head and then goes on off up Spa Creek.
That's correct.
And then in the proposed drawing, the harbor line is proposed to be drawn, this dotted line.
No, that's not it.
Okay.
That dotted line is the 5 foot setback from the 25 foot or the 25% distance across.
All right,
which
so the new
Corps of
harbor
Engineers
line
standard.
is designed to go to here, across the
Exactly.
face of that T, down here and around.
That's correct.
All right, so then back to my earlier question was, if in fact the dock was constructed all the way out, and again, we're not here to approve the construction of the dock. That's port wardens and Corps of Engineers and other people will weigh in on that. We're just drawing, essentially, we're creating the size of the yard in which the playground equipment is going to go or is proposed to go. But then this distance from the T head here, theoretically, a vessel should not extend its beam, assuming it's tied side to, its beam should not extend over the harbor line. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. The port wardens typically require a 5 foot setback from the harbor line, and that's to account from construction errors, which are typical. So if you build something, or if the contractor builds something and it's 2 or 3 feet off, it's still behind the harbor line. And that line is proposed is 5 feet off the end of the proposed T head. So it's not designated as a slip. And I think in my note to you, Terry, typically that's considered a temporary slip. So if you have a guest or if, you're going out to the race and you have to bring in crew and gear, and then after the race you have to offload it, you would do it there, but it's not a permanent slip.
Frank, I have a question. Why is the existing harbor line not 25% out? Because you and I both know that harbor line was done back in the 80s, and it has been adhered to very strictly since. So why the divergence now to something that is 25% as opposed to the existing harbor line? Where did that come from?
Where 25% is the Corps of Engineers standard. It's, it's 20, you're allowed, or
I
at most,
understand. Why wasn't the existing harbor line out that far before? Why did the
Well,
city create it where it is?
the original Title 15, which was then Chapter 10, was written in 1979. And it said there will be a harbor line map, and here's how the harbor line map shall be drawn. So then staff drew the line. The whole thing was adopted in February of 1980. And the 25% rule didn't even come into play at the time because that was a Corps of Engineers standard. This was the city standard. And the point is, when you extend any structure beyond the harbor line and seek permission, thou shalt not go any farther than 25% across, because that is a federal standard.
So do you see this as setting a precedent for other marinas to also request to go 25% across?
Well, it's been done in the past. And again, as I explained, I don't think any of the examples that I included have that, but it has been done in the past. And it's somewhere in the record books. I mean, if you really want to see one, I'm sure I could pull one out, but it would take a while. But it has been done.
So
Go ahead, Terry.
let me ask you sort of a corollary question. The 25% rule is sort of fraught with ambiguities. Number one is you're not going to go 25% across at a waterfront property on facing on the Severn River, say at Eastport Yacht Club. So there's some limitation in that. But also, and maybe Beth is the right person to answer the question, I thought you also, if a channel is not dead in the center of the remaining 50%, you can't encroach on the navigable channel, even though you may have a right to go out 25%, but I take it you can't encroach on the navigable channel.
You can't. And, that's a Corps of Engineers thing. And a good example is Bayfront Drive off of Edgewood Road. And if you're familiar with that, it's the road is on the right-hand side before you get to the end of down to Bemby Beach and the sailing school. And there are a number of homes down there. And when that senior center was built back in the 90s, they brought in sewer. And all of those houses, which were small cottages at the time, that were all on septic tank, went with sewer. And so suddenly they were very valuable, and I think all of them have been rebuilt since then. The fetch there to the opposite shoreline, which is the eastern shore, is about 8 miles. And it would be ridiculous to assume that anybody would even think about putting a pier out that far. But there is a channel mark out there, which marks the channel to Chesapeake Harbor, which is about 2,000 feet out there. And again, nobody in their right mind would propose to go out to that point because it would obstruct navigation. And that would be turned down by the city, the state, and the Corps of Engineers. So, I mean, those are extreme examples. But here up in the creeks in the city, it's a lot tighter. But the whole object of the Corps proposal is to keep the middle half of the fairway open for navigation.
So back to the earlier, and I don't know if I'm sharing or not. Share screen. So Frank, one of the things we have considered in the past is basically taking a line, an arbitrary line from, say, something in this range where a typical boat would come around, and if they're going to Truxton Park, you know, they're not gonna come dipping down into here, certainly. But the question is that does the proposed pier extend beyond a line that essentially connects these two peninsulas? And I ask it because I couldn't on the stop share. If I go back to the other drawing, this drawing, and share screen, have to keep bouncing back and forth here. Share screen. The drawing doesn't take us up to that point, so it's hard. It takes us from this corner here, but it's hard to see. We can't see where it goes up at the other end. The same thing with this drawing. But does it extend out beyond that particular sort of my arbitrary line of which I call sort of a practical navigation line of a vessel that's going up Spa Creek that is not restricted by whatever the depth may be there, but is say going to Truxton, that's or to another one of the moorings up there. Would this pier, and again, I understand we're not really discussing the pier, but this portion of the harbor line, I take it, does not extend beyond that practical line between the 2 points.
Harry, if you scroll down, look at the next drawing.
You're right. Thank you. That was the one he added on. So if you were going up Spa Creek, you're going to come right through. You're going to be behind that point, I guess. All right, Beth, I had sent you a copy and I asked for you. Actually, Frida, let me take Frida first.
Thank you so much. Hi, Frank. I just had a question. Now that you've got the measurements, will there be a new staff report issued? Because in reading the previous report, they said that they didn't have enough information to go on. Thank you.
Right. Well, I did, in addition to the Maritime Advisory Board, I also sent the same information to the staff of the port wardens. So I would assume that he would pass it around. I know that he's going to give it to the board members. And I note that the staff memo came out of Mike Malinoff's office. It's prepared by Victoria Buckland and Beth too. So I see Beth had a hand in that. So I suppose I could send this to Mike, so he would be aware that we've answered his questions.
So if I could answer that, Terry.
Yes, sir.
So I asked Vicki, with the additional information that Frank sent, did she have what she needed? And the response to me was yes. So I'm assuming, I don't know whether they feel they need to redraft, but they did feel that they had all the information they needed. And obviously we have Beth here, so she can supplement her information on that.
And that was going to be my next question. Beth, what is your take on this that you can share with us that will help us enlighten us?
So we did not have enough information until I think like yesterday or today. And then given the last picture that we just were looking at, our team does not support this amendment to the harbor line. The reason we advise against this movement is because it would limit the availability of safer, more shoreward waterway for small boats, paddlecraft, and sailboats, and increase the likelihood of boat accidents. So if we think about if we're on like a kayak or a paddleboard and we're going through like this deep water I mean, if we only are, we're kind of forgetting that these are shared waterways, and the loudest conversations that anyone is having in every single state of the union is that shared waterways are the most complex thing because waterways are crowded. So when we narrow down these channels, even though it seems like it's a fine idea, in our opinion, it's not. So additionally, the mooring in question is an annual mooring and it holds a 42-foot vessel. When we add the scope and the swing, there will be just over 100 feet between the boat and the proposed pier at certain times when the wind and current cause that stern to be at a, that the stern of the boat would be at the closest point to the proposed pier end. So I know this is not a popular opinion, but this is our entire team's consensus that we don't approve this. We don't recommend it.
So Beth, is there a location that your team does recommend short of the additional 69 feet?
I think we would have to be, no, we have not discussed that. So we would have to be asked that, and I would reconvene with my team to see what we think.
So
Well,
May I ask another question? This is Debbie. Is the argument that there will not be an increase in the number of slips based on the idea that President's Point is going to abandon some of the slips that it currently has because they think it's too shallow or too small? Because there are definitely more slips that would be built in this.
That's true. They would remove slips that you see on the bulkhead. I'm not sure which 7 they would be, but that tight little spot down there. And also, Beth, I should note that there is passage on the other side of that mooring, which I guess is the east side. So you have to take that into consideration as well. I mean, the space in between the mooring and the end of the proposed pier wouldn't be the only part of the fairway that would be accessible.
I mean, the problem is when we're talking about larger yachts, because that's the reason we're asking for this additional pier, they only have so much visibility when we're looking at paddlecraft, small craft, sailboats, etc. So these waterways are super busy, and we're sort of setting ourselves up to fail because I feel like it's already as busy as it can be. So that's kind of where our team stands.
Frank, have they talked about dredging? Because that's what other marinas in the area have done to maintain their water depth. They get dredging permits.
They have not with me.
So that's an option that historically other marinas have done that they have not considered.
I couldn't tell you if they considered that or not there. I don't know.
I have a
So
question.
the shallowness is down in this corner down here.
Yeah, I think a lot of the marinas have shallow spots.
I have a question.
Some of us has found it. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, Beth, have you considered moving the mooring?
No, we're not really in the habit of moving city equipment for a private endeavor. So it's our habit. If you want to have, if you have this thing that you want to do, then you have to propose to the city how you would like to move that, because that's a lot of work. And that person that owns that annual mooring may or may not want to move where their boat is. So that would have to be proposed by the condominium. So if they said oh, we could move this mooring, then we might entertain that, but that would be at their cost. And we have not had that conversation.
Thank you.
So back to my question is there is a certain distance now, it's the black line, this black line plus 69 feet. I think that was the figure that 69 feet is the current. Well, so it's 217 plus 69, that's 286. Is there a distance with which your staff would be comfortable short of 69 feet that would be if that mooring were not moved.
We haven't had that conversation. And so I would not give an answer unless I convene with my team.
Well, Beth, I have a question. Does the ground tackle on that mooring, is that weighted or is that a helix? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Was it Alan? Was it you that had a question? No.
I do.
Oh, Scott did.
Yeah.
And Duncan did. We'll start with Scott.
Okay, Duncan.
I'm bad about recognizing these little orange hands.
I don't know if Frank can answer this or not. The drawing that was sent, I guess you call the blueprint drawing, the pier is not at the same angle relative to the shoreline as the old one. Looks like it's right angles and the new one is slightly left. And I'm wondering if the attachment to the bulkhead, if that was moved to its left, if you're looking out on the new one, and the T-head was brought closer to shore, wouldn't that solve some of these questions that everybody has with that? Beth, your distance to that mooring would come in a little bit, the harbor line would come in a little bit, but it looks like this new pier is tilted or cocked to the left somewhat versus the old drawing, the original drawing, and I just didn't have an answer for that. But it seems like if you could even take the pier and attach it 20 feet to the left on the bulkhead and then bring the T-head to the right out in the harbor, that you gain some of these distances that everybody's looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't answer to that again. I would not answer to that unless I see what the change would be.
Yeah.
And I guess the question to Frank is there some restriction on this bank? Because I can't tell if this is an access drive or what this is that comes down to this location. And I mean, is that point at the bulkhead there for a reason or just arbitrary?
I really don't know, Terry. This is what they proposed. I suppose if they had to consider another option, and that option was to move it farther up the bulkhead, I'm sure they would consider it. I'm not sure how much additional space you would get, though. They'd have to draw it up and see what that is. But if you look at the Google Earth map that I supplied, I did the extension there. I canted it a little bit. I laid both of these site plans, the existing and proposed, on a light table, and it's canted just a little bit. It's not, really significant. So you see the addition that I put on there has a little cant to it to account for that difference. But it would seem it's possible they could move it up further. But I have to say that the engineers who drew this up leaned heavily on the American Society of Civil Engineers standards for small marinas, which, of course, Crescent Point wasn't built to that standard because it was built back in the 80s. So that's their reason for putting it where they put it.
Frank, are you a consultant for President's Point?
I am. Well, there are two consultants. There's your engineers and me.
And you. So historically, the only amendments to the harbor lines that I'm aware of are ones that were deemed to be an error. But I do not recall a harbor line amendment simply to allow a marina to add more slips further out. And I do think that this would be precedent setting. I can't imagine any marina that wouldn't like to abandon some shallow slips and build some more slips further out.
Well, you're right, Deb. Most of the harbor line amendments do correct errors, and there are any number of errors in that map. But several of them have increased the waterway area that's usable by the adjacent marina. And I think the older Jabin Marina is one of them. Because the harbor line is drawn very radically around there. And Rod Jabin at one point proposed to straighten that line out, which was approved at the time. And it gave him much more waterway space.
I can't speak to that one. That could have been a long time ago, and I don't know that. I just know my experience.
Terry, I
So-
can speak to that.
Okay.
So the two most recent harbor line amendments that I've sponsored, because I'm the alderman where the water is, were for Butler Marine, which was a change in their harbor line, not because of errors, but because he wanted to reconfigure the marina. And in that case, he got some more space, but gave up some more space. And the harbor line at 222 Severn, where again, it was not a correction in terms of error, it was a correction to readjust the configuration of the marina. And there was a give and take. We'll carve out in another part of our harbor line in order to get the adjustment for the piers that they wanted.
What troubles, I say troubles me is Beth's comments about the how much it is narrowed with that with the mooring that's 213 feet away. You take a 40-foot boat, even if it was sitting right on top of the mooring, that puts it down to 177 feet. You stretch out a scope of 3 to 1 or 5 to 1, and assuming the depth there is, just for sake of argument, would be 10 feet. You put a scope of 50 more feet. Now you're down to 137 feet. And that troubles me, that you're now down to 137 feet. And two things are happening. Not only are you constraining it down to 137 feet, but you've now got bigger boats in this particular marina who are coming and going if the wind is blowing in that particular direction. And that direction is what, northeast maybe, or east, northeast. Not as often in the summertime, but we do get it. So it begins to seem to me, at least, and I'll defer to the majority of the board, that the president's point, or their engineer and Beth's staff should sit down and discuss how to mitigate, minimize, or otherwise work with the concerns that the harbor master has, at the same time understanding that there is a cogent reason why this particular pier in this area needs to be reconfigured, in part to satisfy the civil engineering standards, but also to accommodate what I think we all know to be both beamier and people going to longer boats. So it just seems to me that there ought to be a middle ground is almost descriptive, but there ought to be a point where the length of that pier is compatible with the with the mooring, either by way of moving the mooring, by way of shortening the pier, but picks up a more reasonable
Hey, Terry.
distance. Yes.
Frank, have you guys considered angling that extension? That might kind of solve the problem if you angle it upstream slightly.
That has been part of my discussion with them. They may well have discussed that with their engineering firm.
And I hear Beth's comment, and I get it. because you can draw a pretty good circle around that mooring. And that starts to really restrict stuff. But if you tip that extension a little bit, it might be a compromise for everybody.
To Ross's point about trading off some of the waterway area to compensate for any additional waterway gained. If you look at your harbor line map, which is part of the original package, Crescent Point is, it goes all the way. I don't know if you've got it there, Terry, or not, but it goes all the way around the point to the point that it shares with Wells Cove.
Yep.
Hold on a minute. I'll pull up the Google Earth. Getting faster. You're talking about where it goes around here.
It goes further. It goes all the way up to the point where it dips into Wells Cove, which is an area they don't use, obviously. So if we get into a discussion of whether or not they could subtract part of their waterway area to compensate for this, that would be a very easy thing to do at that curve, at that point.
Well, that's they're giving up unused. As you said, this is pretty shallow through here.
It is very shallow.
Yes.
And I think the fact that there's no piers there now is reflective of the fact how shallow it has been.
I'd say so.
Otherwise, they would have built piers there.
Yeah.
To that point, Gary, if they wanted to dredge those areas to accommodate a pier right now, per that last drawing from Frank, they could do that theoretically, so long as they don't exceed the harbor line.
Through
You're
that.
talking about on this area here.
Yeah, or even all the way around to the right beyond where, beyond the point. That harbor line is fairly far out. Can you hold that back up, Frank?
See that? It's not. I know you've got that in your package somewhere, but that's the area right there.
That's the far end, right? Going back.
Sorry. No, that's correct. It's just the reverse picture you're seeing.
Yep.
That's it right there. This is Preston Point here.
So we're at a point of either a motion to recommend a favorable approval, recommend non-approval, or to recommend something in between, or the applicant can go back and have it. And Ross, you tell me about, because it is legislation, what would they need to do to essentially table this enough to go back and talk to Beth and see if they don't come up with a plan that is more acceptable to the harbor master and addresses the concerns we've raised tonight.
So the point of, in my view, of the Maritime Advisory Board in this regard, and the harbor master and people like Mike who use these waters, is to make sure that the waters are safely navigable. And so if I were the applicant, I would take the things that I've heard from this meeting and go back and reconvene. I also think I heard from Beth, I didn't realize that materials only came yesterday, which was a holiday. So I think that it would be, for my comfort level, it would be good to have a timeout and go back to the drawing board and see what we can come up with. But it is obviously, again, as a person who navigates these waters, safe navigation is the paramount consideration.
Yep, I hear that.
Won't
So-
this go in front of the port wardens as well?
Yes, but they only talk about from the land, the construction of the piers. They don't really tend to get into navigation. They say that's the MAB. They're very,
Well,
But
they
the harbor
draw-
line, they manage the harbor line.
Well, I've had this discussion previously. We set the property line boundaries, so to speak, at least at the harbor line end, and then they tell you what you can build inside your property. And that's about the simplest way to put it.
right.
Yeah.
It's a two-stop process. It's not a one-stop shopping.
So this is
That's new to me.
scheduled for the port wardens next Tuesday, the 23rd.
Well, that would probably mean postponing that one and until you get this sorted out. I mean, we can take a vote. I think it might not go as favorably as you might wish it to. That's just my own thinking. But I'd rather see that there's a way, particularly that the engineer and the harbor master can come up with a configuration that addresses the harbor master's concern, the concerns that have been raised here in terms of just the navigation and in particular navigation of either very larger vessels or on the flip side the paddlecraft, canoe, kayak genre. My Mako 22 would have no problem probably with that. I'd go around the mooring one side or the other, and it's not a big deal. I think somebody with a 40-foot boat coming up through there on the right wind conditions and paddle boarders coming down, it might be more problematic. But that's just my take.
Well, I can
Yeah.
actually support that, having been up and down there in my 56-foot boat, especially during the Parade of Lights. Oh my goodness gracious me, that gets pretty darn narrow when you put 2 or more boats passing it in there.
All right. Frank, you want to take this back to your client and we'll say we could table it, or as Mr. Alderman Arnett said, he'd rather see a compromise or at least a resolution that's more satisfactory to everybody.
If you choose to table it, I'll certainly talk to President Point and have them discuss with their engineer what other options might be. I think, as an aside, I think dredging is the more expensive option. And of course, you have to maintenance dredge over time. So you could dredge it out, and then 10 years from now, you'd have to dredge it again. So I would guess they would not take that option.
Well, dredging would just give you a depth, but I'm not sure it would help you with any size, changing the size of boats down in that corner, because they still got to get out of a slip and make a turn with the existing pier.
Well,
But if I may, as I understand it, because this is a condominium, all of the boats actually own their slips. So while you see larger boats at the end of the bulkhead on the north end, that guy owns that slip, unless he does a trade with the people on the T head. I would guess that the T head, they would just simply take the boats that are there and shove them out farther, and take the smaller boats that are now at the bulkhead and put them on the inside of a new pier. So I don't think it would, the size of the boats wouldn't change much more than what it is now.
Mhm.
but part of the justification for this is that you are creating larger slips for more modern boats. And there is an increase in the number of slips for bigger boats using
Right.
public waterway,
That's true.
which is certainly a lot cheaper than them paying for dredging themselves.
Yeah. True.
So just by way of comparison, we can look, we do have some dimensions here. So the first slip, well, these are slip numbers, not dimensions, are they, I thought those were dimensions on those slips, but they're not. They're just the slip number.
Between the finger piers, it's 30 feet, so you're looking at maximum 15 feet width in each of those slips. That's the new one.
And I think I scaled this T head as 75 minus 5 for the walk. That's 70. That puts each of these slips approximately, this one might be a little longer, this is a little longer, but something in the 35 to 40 foot finger pier range.
Well, both the existing slips are the distance between the finger piers. On the existing pier is 30 feet. And on the new pier, it's also 30 feet, but the fingers are much longer.
Right. And the T head is much longer.
Right.
Or wider, I guess. So I guess we're back to the threshold question is, Frank, do you want to, I guess withdraw is the right word. Do you want us to table this and you go back and meet with your people and perhaps encourage them to meet with the harbor master, and we just bring this back to the February meeting?
Well, yes, I think tabling would be preferable at this point. And hopefully we can work out a solution.
Right. And Ross, I guess you need to do whatever you need to do at the council level to table it also.
Yeah, I don't think we're close to the 90-day rule, so
Right.
I'll just ask that it not be put on the agenda until there's amicable solution be taken into consideration, proper navigation.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Frank?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. And while they're at it, if the engineer were to add some dimensions on those new finger piers, and the old finger piers probably would help too.
Okay.
All right. With that, Frank, you can stay and be bored, or you can go.
Well, I'd stay, but I do have other things to do. But it's I have to tell you, it's very nice seeing you all again. So
Yes.
hope you're well.
And thank you for a good presentation on this and a good understanding of it. I know your client's going to be a little disappointed that we didn't act on it, but it wasn't due for lack of presentation.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let's go back. We'll jump back to the approval of, and I don't have my handy dandy, it says October minutes, but it's actually the approval of the December minutes, which were very, very short since we had a very abbreviated agenda. So is there a motion by someone? Alan, you were there. You can move. Peter got his hand up first. Peter moved. Alan seconded. And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us there. So all in favor that were there? All right, minutes were approved. Moving on to the next, Duncan, was anything happen at the November meeting?
Negative. I saw the minutes. I was not able to attend, and it doesn't look like anything really has moved from where we were before. So
There was no December meeting because it would have fallen on, I think, Christmas Day.
Yep.
And Alan, you get the January meeting. I think there is one. I think there's a January, February, and maybe a April, May or something. It's a funny schedule. So, but Alan will have that one. Hope, anything on your end to update
Yes.
us with?
Yeah, well, you'd mentioned the maritime reporting letters. I know if you have specific questions about these, Steve said go ahead and reach out to him. But the letters did go out in December, and the deadline to return them is the end of January. So we're hoping the more we do this, the better responses we will receive. And I know you have economic gardening on this agenda as well. Not much of an update there. We've got two businesses participating in economic gardening. Neither of them are maritime this time around, but we are still open for applications. We're kind of taking them on a rolling basis because we understand that when we had opened the application round, it was during the holidays, so a difficult time for people to focus on getting those applications in. So if there is any interest, we are still accepting applications for our program.
And I sent everybody, Hope, the copy of the notice that came out from Jill Porter at Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation that they're taking, actually started today, taking applications for what they call the VOLT Discovery Relief, Disaster Recovery Relief Program. And the gist of her email was, please help spread the word to any maritime related organizations impacted that might fit these parameters, which is the offering of grants up to $50,000 to help small minority-owned, woman-owned, and veteran-owned businesses as a result of the state of emergency that was declared by the governor. So if you have a small business that falls into that category that could benefit from a grant for disaster relief, please let them know to contact Anne Arundel Economic Development. They have a very good website with the county, and so that would be a good source of assistance for them if they qualify. And that's all I know about it, unless you hope you know anything more.
No, the applications did open today, and we did make the businesses that we're aware of and nonprofits such as the Maritime Museum aware of the portal.
Oh, good. Okay.
And then I don't know, Alderman Arnett, you have your hand raised. I don't know if it was.
Yes, I was wondering if we've collected any fees for the Maritime Fund.
I can't answer that question yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
We do want to know that.
We do, yes.
And in that same regard, in looking back at in preparing the annual report for this board, which we'll get to, I looked back at the original title 02521, and there were several reports, annual reports, but in one in particular was the report that was to commence no later than December 31st and no later than of 2023 and no later than December 31st of every successive fourth year, that the Planning Commission shall submit findings and recommendations to the City Council for changes to the table of uses and or standards applicable to the waterfront districts in order to preserve the maritime industry as a vibrant part of the Annapolis heritage. I suspect nobody has taken any action to bring that to the planning board, but I just ask that you put that on Stephen or whatever staff member would be responsible for that. Maybe it's Jackie. Plate that we would be interested in seeing that report to the Planning Commission and knowing when it's going to go in.
Okay, yeah, Jackie Rouse is no longer with the City of Annapolis, so it would be zoning, but we will actually bring that to the attention of our director.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm behind the times. Jackie was there so long.
I know she retired.
I just
she
assumed
decided it was
she
time to
was
take her
still there.
retirement and enjoy life.
Okay. Agenda. Now, here we go. regarding the street and park upgrades, Beth has been very good about putting out an updated report. I sent it around to everybody. She even has some nice color pictures. And I guess apropos our discussion of the work barges off Cheston Avenue, the first picture on the front page is of the Cheston Avenue project. It's 90 to 95% complete. I passed it around. There's also an update on the charter dock, just statistics on the charter dock. And it looks like we were down 5 charter bookings, but there were less cancellations Beth, was there any pattern to the cancellations? Looks like there were more cancellations this year than last year.
I'm pretty sure the differences are probably immaterial. I would not say they're statistically significant. That's what I would say.
Okay. And on January 1st, that was when the mini cruise ship or whatever they call themselves, they came in for the 4th of July. I mean, for the New Year's Eve.
Yeah, and I think it's nice. Some people are mad about it, but most people think it's great for the city. I think it's cool.
But they were parked where they were parked across the city dock, right?
Yeah, we only do it once a year because otherwise Watermark has their lease, and otherwise the waterway is too busy. But on January 1st, it's kind of nice. We can just.
So they came in. They didn't come in and block it for New Year's Eve fireworks.
No, they come at 6 a.m. on January 1st, and they leave at 4 or 5 p.m. So I think it kind of works, but I don't give them that leeway any other day. So.
Okay. My
Beth,
concern was whether or not I would have bet that I would have guessed there would have been a lot more uproar if they had come in New Year's Eve.
No, we would never let that happen.
Okay.
Beth, you watch the weather for that too, right? Because that boat is really not appropriate for that dock unless it's nice and calm.
So we actually put a caveat on their contract that says that if there's any wind or we say they can't come, then they can't come. So literally, if there's any wind or waves, then they can't come. And it has to be flat. It has to be flat, calm, and they agree to that and they sign off on that.
That's smart.
Yep, we have to, because that is not built for that boat. I totally agree. And, we don't want it to damage the dock.
Right. Thanks.
Anybody else have any questions or comments on that? Hearing none, we'll move to the next. Alan and Scott about we call it the Maryland Maritime Hall of Fame. I think we were working on an alternative name, but is there any update on that?
Nothing from my end over the holidays. Mary Ewenson gave me a couple of contacts that I'm going to make on suggestions she had at the steering committee to follow up on, but nothing since then. Unless Alan has something else.
Okay. That was simple. Beth, you gave us your report on, I think there was a blurb on here about on the last page about house barges. That legislation is being prepared to revise the code section. So we'll just await more information on that. But it did raise a question in my mind that actually came up in a conversation earlier today. And that is, we think about house barges because they're square, they look like a floating hotel room. But is there any companion or similar legislation for just more generic boat B&Bs, either at marinas or at a private dock?
So some of the proposed legislation by an area attorney is also including some of these, and frankly, some of it is not realistic. I mean, I don't think the city wants, so the proposed legislation, which the city has not proposed, but it sort of like says that there could be about 300 house barges and or Airbnbs in city waters. The administration has not approved this, but they're looking at this because like someone's attorney has proposed this.
That's
And
man.
so there's so many problems because the city has already had so many objections to short-term rental, and house barges have their own problems, and short-term rentals are a different animal. And so it's super confusing to me to figure out how anyone could ever approve this because of the fire hazards, because of the environmental hazards, because of what it might do to the increase in the amount that we would pay to rent a slip. So I don't know how we're going to get our heads around this. And I have not heard any consensus about this.
So if I hear you there, and at least in my mind, there are somewhat three generic categories. One, you have the generic on-land short-term rental, physical structure, house structure. Secondly, you have house barges, which are basically designed to be a floating apartment of some sort. And then you have a traditional motor or sail vessel that was designed to be a motor or sail vessel that somebody is simply renting out in their backyard, or perhaps at a marina, but more likely in their backyard, to on a website.
And some of these folks want to say that their vessel that will never be able to navigate on its own is also a charter. So they're trying to use this loophole in the CFR to say that it's a charter. And it's not a charter, but the Coast Guard's not going to inspect it. So we have some very challenging things ahead of us. We're getting ready to meet with the Coast Guard to see what makes sense moving forward. Because if we allow short-term rentals in this flavor, they don't pay property taxes, and they don't have any of the checks and balances. So maybe someone has a heart attack, we can't get them out of the door. Maybe they have fire hazards. Maybe they don't have to have sprinklers. There's so many considerations. And so I don't know how we're going to overcome these objections.
Well, we may not. I mean, some objections just may be, some risks may not be worth taking. I mean, plain and simple. All right. Well, we'll just stay on top of it. I mean, it's been an issue going back to the original house barge legislation, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, and it is just going to continue to blossom with the advent of, or with short-term rentals and variations of those short-term rentals. So I suspect at some point we'll need to take it up in more detail, but it's good to know that the city is at least agonizing over what to do. And getting farther down the list, new business, I sent everybody a copy of the proposed annual report. And I didn't get any comments back, which the cynic in me says because nobody paid attention to it, or it was so well written that there weren't any comments. But I have Frida with her hand up with a comment. So good. Somebody
Terry, I just wanted to say thank you for doing the heavy lifting on this report. It was very well written, and I don't have any changes or suggestions to make. And thank you for taking this burden off of us.
And good for you, Frida. Thank you for saying that.
Well, she's not here, but oh, yes, she is. Kimberly. It's Kimberly who did a lot of the heavy lifting because I use Kimberly's very well-written minutes every, from each month to do the summary of the things we did. Some of the rest of it is more boilerplate, but it's Kimberly's efforts that contribute to substance. So thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you both.
And so is there a motion to adopt the report, and after which, if approved, I will send to the, Duncan is moved. Peter, I think, had his hand up second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The report is adopted. And the final order of business, which we actually are getting to on the right day, is and not waiting until halfway through the year, is the election of a chair and vice chair. And I will entertain anybody that wants to stand up and do this, or I will entertain a motion to continue the status quo.
Yeah, I would absolutely move to continue the status quo.
And I
Nobody
second that motion.
Nobody can fill your shoes, man.
Somebody's going to have to one of these. Mike's going to have to one of these days, and then somebody's going to have to step into Mike's shoes. So
it's lonely at the top, Tari.
it's, you know, it is. It is. I tell you, it's hard to drink alone.
Hey, it's
All
hard.
right. Is there a motion to re-elect the current chair and vice chair?
I'm afraid there is.
Okay, Duncan, that's Duncan's. Frida's second. No discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
You got it, Kimberly. Is there any other business to be brought before the meeting? Mike.
Just real quickly, Terry, I'm not sure everybody's aware or if anybody knew him, but Fred Hanlon died recently, who was the mechanic at Inflatable Experts for a long time. When they were bought by Faucets, he went over and worked for Faucets for a spell, and then opened up his own shop with his son down at Liberty Marina. Just a wealth of marine knowledge and the ability to keep two-stroke outboards running well beyond their expected service life. And that I think that happened about a week or so ago. His family is hosting a memorial service. I think if I have the details correct, it's this Saturday, and I'll forward it out to anybody who's interested in attending. But just a solid guy, a real fixture, at least here at 2227, and sorely missed. So.
Well, I totally agree with you. What happened to him, Mike? Did he just have a heart attack or something?
That I don't know. I hadn't heard. His son is fairly close with a couple of my former employees, so that's how I got the word. But yeah, help me out on innumerable occasions, from just having the right size bolt on hand, or helping me figure out how to back a screw out of a really tight spot. So I mean, an incredible loss to the maritime community for sure.
I agree with you there.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Debbie, thank you. Any seconds? Mike, second. All in favor?
Aye.
See everybody, all unanimous, Kimberly, and I'll see everybody in February. And I guess we'll hopefully hear back from Frank and Beth that they have sat around a campfire and sang Kumbaya.
I'll look forward to it.